Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande. Go. Reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. This is introduction. Abai had already concluded that this was certainly not just another dubious sadhu, and he listened attentively to the arguments of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta and found himself gradually becoming convinced. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati quoted Sanskrit verses from Bhagavad Gita, wherein Lord Krishna declares that a person should give up all other religious duties and surrender unto him, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Abai had never forgotten Lord Krishna and his teachings in Bhagavad Gita, and his family had always worshipped Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whose mission Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was espousing. But he was astounded to hear those teachings presented so masterfully. Abai felt defeated in argument, but he liked it. When the discussion was completed after 2 hours, he and his friend walked down the stairs and onto the street. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's explanation of the independence movement as a temporary, incomplete cause had made a deep impression on Abai. He felt himself less a nationalist and more a follower of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. He also thought it would have been better if he weren't married. This great personality was asking him to preach. He could have immediately joined, but to leave his family, he felt, would be an injustice. He is wonderful, Abai told his friend. The message of Lord Chaitanya is in the hands of a very expert person. Srila Prabhupada would later recall that on that very night he had actually accepted Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati as his spiritual master. Not officially, Prabhupada said, but in my heart I was thinking that I had met a very nice, saintly person. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai. Shishi Kodanitai Mayapur Shashi ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 1, text number 30. Nishamya Mriyamanasya Nishamya Mriyamanasya Mukato Harikirtanam Mukato Harikirtanam Bhartur Nama Maharaja Bhartur Nama Maharaja Parshada Sahasapatam Parshada Sahasapatam Nishamya Mriyamanasya Mukato Harikirtanam Bharturnama Maharaja Parshada Sahasapatan Nishamyamriya Manasya 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 Mukato Harikirtanam Bharturnama Maharaja Mataji. Nishamyamriya Manasya Mukato Harikirtanam Bharturnama Maharaja Parshada Sahasapatan Nishamya, hearing, Mriyamanasya, of the dying man, Mukata, from the mouth, Harikirtanam, chanting of the holy name of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Bhartunama, the holy name of their master. Maharaja, O king. Parshada, the order carriers of Vishnu. Sahasa, immediately. Apatan, arrived. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. My dear king, the order carriers of Vishnu, the Vishnu Dutas, immediately arrived when they heard the holy name of their master from the mouth of the dying Ajamil, who had certainly chanted without offense because he had chanted in complete anxiety. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur remarks, Hari Kirtanam Nishamyapatan Katam Bhutasya Bhartur Nama Bruvataha. The order carriers of Lord Vishnu came because Ajamil had chanted the holy name of Narayan. They did not consider why he was chanting. While chanting the name of Narayan, Ajamil was actually thinking of his son. But simply because they heard Ajamil chanting the Lord's name, the order carriers of Lord Vishnu, the Vishnu Dutas, immediately came for Ajamil's protection. Hari Kirtana is actually meant to glorify the holy name, form, pastimes, and qualities of the Lord. Ajamil, however, did not glorify the form, qualities, or paraphernalia of the Lord, he simply chanted the holy name. Nevertheless, that chanting was sufficient to cleanse him of all sinful activities. As soon as the Vishnu Dutas heard their master's name being chanted, they immediately came. In this regard, Srila Vijayadvaja Tirtha remarks, Anena putra sneham antarena prachinar drishta balad udbhutaya bhaktya bhagavan nama sankirtanam kritam iti gyayate. Ajamil chanted the name of Narayan because of his excessive attachment to his son. Nevertheless, because of his past good fortune in having rendered devotional service to Narayan, he apparently chanted the holy name in full devotional service and without offenses. Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Deham Shri Guru Shri Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagarjatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindubhya evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langaiti Girim Yatkipati Muhammad Shri Gurum Tina Taranam. So translation again. My dear king, the order carriers of Vishnu, the Vishnu Dutas, immediately arrived when they heard the holy name of their master from the mouth of the dying Ajamil, who had certainly chanted without offense, because he had chanted in complete anxiety. So this whole life story of Ajamil is showing how potent is the holy name of the Lord. As we read in a few verses now, how Ajamil lived a very, very sinful way of life. He became a thief, he was stealing, doing all sorts of things just to get somehow another money by illegal means. He had a very large family, he was maintaining a prostitute. So he did a lot of horrible things in his life. And as we read, Yamadutas arrived to deal with him. Of course, sometimes people wonder, how I can believe these Yamadutas and etc. I never seen anything like it. But actually, I read in a medical profession, there is, it has been registered. There is even a term for it. It's called terminal restlessness. So I won't get too much into it, but just to mention a little bit, because we're going through this strong topic, and sometimes maybe mind influenced by Kali Yuga may doubt, about existence of such subtle beings who come to deal with you at the time of death. But yeah, what is terminal restlessness describes that people are become extremely fearful. Not everyone, but there is a certain amount of people who are become extremely fearful and kind of freaking out. They have those who have terminal illness, and apparently sometimes they even have certain visions that kind of freak them out. So I won't get too much into that. But yeah, it is a fact that these beings exist, and just like there's a certain people who have perception of subtle beings who are very good, like there's the whole new age phenomena that people connect with subtle beings like angels, and they have crystals and all sorts of things just to invoke some good fortune or good karma or some better consciousness and etc. Which is, these things are there, but it's only have like a temporary effect, a temporary short-lived effect. So in the same way, there's other beings who perform, who kind of deliver to us our good karma. So there will be beings that deliver to us this challenging and difficult karma, because as we all understand, and there is a law of karma, and there's a law of action and reaction. So in the same way, just like good karma gets delivered, so whatever we did in terms of causing suffering and misery to other living beings, there will be a certain reaction that we have to suffer. And there is a certain agents that fulfill, just like there is a police department in the society, there is a prison house for those who are, very break the law on a serious level. Some people just get away of, you pay a fine, or you maybe do some works for the public for half a year or something. And then if the crime is a lot more serious, then some people will go to the jail, and there is like it could be quite a miserable existence, although nowadays it has become quite a luxury in a prison house. But in not, the idea was that there is some reformation has to be done, and so in some countries it's still quite a miserable existence to spend some time in a jail. So universally there is also realms where we enjoy our good karma, heavenly realms, and there is also realms where we suffer. If there is not sufficient suffering on this earthly realm, if the karma is really bad and there is not sufficient facility to deliver suffering in this earthly realm, there is some lower realms where one goes to suffer this bad karma. So Ajamil, according to his life, that was very, very sinful, according to estimation of those agents that deliver karma, is supposed to go to the lower realm, and they arrived to take him down, take him there. However, now we are seeing the potency of the holy name, because he chanted the holy name at the time of death. The agents of Vishnu also arrived on the scene, and this is going to be the whole conversation now, trying to understand, the potency of the holy name and how this extremely sinful person actually become purified by chanting. Of course, it's not something that we think, sometimes people think, okay, this is what they have to do. And when the time of death approaches, I'm just gonna chant the name of Narayan or Krishna, and I just do whatever I like until that time, so I don't have to worry. The only thing I need to do is to chant. But as we can see in this situation, what happens at the time of death, because under that pressure of leaving the body, one will be holding on to things that one is the most attached to. And we can see that this is what's happening here in Ajamil's case, and it is basically a general principle that's going to happen to every one of us, that at the time of departure from this body, when you're pressured to leave the body, you're going to be holding on onto something that you are most attached to. And in this case, you see Ajamil, he was the most attached to his son, who was 2 years old. Luckily, the name of Ajamil, so Ajamil's son, was Narayan, which is the holy name of the Lord. That's why a lot of devotees, not the only single reason, but a lot of devotees would call their sons and daughters with the holy names of the Lord.
So like in our own community, we have Nimai, Prasad, Gaura, Gaura Kishore, and Sachi. What is the full name? Sachi? Sachi Sudha? Is it? Sachi Kishore. Gaura Kishore, Sachi Kishore. Yes, and we have Jalangi, and we used to have Narayan as well in the community. Somebody called Narayan. So devotees, of course, like to give the names of the Lord, and we all have got those names after the time of initiation. But usually the names before initiation, we just got, John, Ramonas, Pip, and Padre. Yeah. But then later on, after initiation, get a spiritual name. So the children and everybody is trying to get a spiritual name, and of course, it's wonderful because when we call each other, we're chanting the name of the Lord. We call Jayananda, and for example, Jayananda, for example, and then we get purified because it's the name of the Lord. Do you know the meaning of your name, Jayananda, bro? He doesn't know, so this will be the homework for you to find out what your name means. It's the name of the Lord, Jayananda. So by chanting, we're calling each other, or sometimes people, like if you have a child and etc., there is this attachment that forms. So you're not only chanting the name of your son or daughter, but you're also remembering. I wonder, how, let's say the child's name is Jayananda. So the mother will think, how is Jayananda doing? Like it's freezing cold now and it's snowing. Is Jayananda warm? Is Jayananda got a warm jacket? Does he need the winter shoes? Like that. So automatically you're chanting the name of the Lord. And of course, Hare Krishna movement hasn't spread so much in the West yet. But if you go to India, the holy name is like on every corner. The name of the shop is Radhe Shyam. The name of like a restaurant is Hari Hari. The name of garage is Govinda. Actually, there's a garage in South Lanarkshire called Gopal, and it's run by this Mr. Singh. So it's not so far from here, but it's still quite rare. But we did had a couple of businesses. There's one business that devotee was living here, and he started a business called Gauranga Delivers. Because Gauranga, of course, delivers. And then there is also another business in Dunfermline. It's called Gopal's Taxi. So that's it looks like a Scottish thing, Gopal's, like a pals, let's go, basically. But we know that it means something else, it's Gopal's. So people are, let's call Gopal's. They're really good. And they're gonna bring me back home after the pub, it's midnight, 3 a.m. Let's call the Gopal's. And it's actually expanded. It was just a one little thing, but now this got the whole fleet. This devotee, I just forgot his name at the top of my head. What is his name? Who runs the taxi? Megasham Prabhu. So he's got now like a 5 or 6 taxis. It really expanded and did really well. So people are chanting Gopals, on Saturday night. To get back to home, they need to call Gopal. So they're getting some mercy, they're getting purification. So it's kind of course, this is just the beginning in the West, but as I mentioned, in India, it's everywhere, and that is considered, it's a great fortune to be born in India. That you just grow up, you go to the school called Govindas, you go to the restaurant called Hari Hari, you're going to Narayan shopping market, like that. So it's just like everywhere. These are everywhere, so you're kind of getting purified. And then if you are become attached to one of these things, you're attached to eating, maybe at the time of death, you'll be thinking about Govinda's restaurant. Oh, I want the samosa from Govinda's. And so this becomes like your great fortune. But that's not sufficient often is not sufficient to get liberation. Of course, we read here that Ajahn will become purified from sinful reactions, but later on we'll find out that he was given another chance. He wasn't just went straight back, to the spiritual world. He had to still work to achieve liberation. So it requires a little bit more than just occasionally chant the name of a restaurant or chant the name of your son. But there was some extra layer there of mercy, and is described that one of the reasons why he called his son Narayan, actually Lord inspired from inside of the heart to give a holy name to his son Narayan because of the devotional service that he performed. So when you perform devotional service, obviously there will be a motivation to please the Lord, at least to some extent. Although in the beginning stages, there may be a mixed motivation, like I chant to become free from some misery. That's like devotees come for various reasons to Krishna consciousness, to become free from some distress. To become free or to gain something materially, economic development, some sort of, as a way of becoming better person or something that also would go under economic development. You try to be a better person, or for the sake of purification. That's also a mode of goodness. So it's still reasonable motivation is you chanting to become purified, free from anarthas. So that will go under sattva guna. But the holy name is supposed to be chanted for the pleasure of the Lord, and we want to become purified so that we can then chant offenselessly. So we need to go what is the ultimate goal. We can be still mixed, we come to Krishna consciousness and maybe not even aware of our motivation while we're chanting, we can be quite mixed. But we need to set our goal, that my goal is to come to the point of pure chanting, that only I want to chant to please Radha and Krishna, and I don't want to gain anything material. I want to chant for their pleasure, and the reason I want to become purified is so that I could glorify them without any personal motivation. I want to become free from false ego, so I chant for their pleasure. So I'm not chanting to, attract, people and think, oh, this is a wonderful singer, or like attract opposite sex or attract the same sex, but we're kind of practicing to chant unconditionally for the pleasure of the Lord. And it can be obviously a challenge. The mind is always, the false ego is always pushing, trying to bring us forward, trying to bring us in the center. Look at me, I'm chanting very nicely. And sometimes you are chanting very nicely for the pleasure of the Lord, and there is this, the Lord is pleased, and there is a ecstasy felt. And then you become proud, I'm chanting so humbly. I'm chanting so humbly with so much devotion, that this Lord has manifested. And, and therefore, look at me again. So it's a battle, it's an ongoing battle. But if we chant very, very nicely our japa, then the heart becomes purified. The false ego starts melting and dissolving if you chant like a very, very nice, good japa. And it is actually another very important point in the, that we're coming to in this verse is that it wasn't only chanting that, you didn't just chant Narayan, Narayan. There was another very important aspect of the chanting, which is very, very significant for us to understand that was as another one of the most important reasons why Vishnudutas arrived there, and why, despite of the fact that he was calling his son, why it was so effective, that why it was so powerful, that this Vijayadvaja Tirtha explains that it was practically considered that it was a devotional service, despite of the fact that he called his son, is because he called with this great feeling. It's described as called with anxiety. And looking in my own kind of very short experience of chanting of few years, this is the best type of japa when you are calling to the Lord with some feeling. And I remember the first experience I ever had when I was chanting with feeling, and although it was materially motivated, when it was very powerful experience that I had in my japa when I was doing master's degree and I was studying computers, internet technologies. Then there was some time when I was really struggling with exams. It was kind of very hard. And also I was trying to practice Krishna consciousness in my own way. And it was, like a combination of all those things made it, quite tough experience. It was like rising early, also being a bit too fanatical, and that kind of thing. So kind of balancing, between this very strict practice of Krishna consciousness and balancing together with the studies. So yeah, it was quite austere actually. So there was this exam, and also, my brain was so dull after, university life became, I went there for sense gratification, and I was before Krishna consciousness, and it was just like just trying to enjoy myself to the max, and it was like becoming like a dull, over gratifying yourself. Become very dull. So I was just suffering to some extent from that dullness as well. It was certain reaction I was going through. So this exam was coming, or a few exams, or some deadline, and I was just like really kind of struggling. But I just understood now that you have to take the shelter of the holy name, because it was beginning of my Krishna consciousness. So I was just like intensely, with great feeling, actually, just calling the holy name of the Lord. And also I learned that you're supposed to chant aloud. So I don't know what my neighbor thought, because it was like a bedsit. It was like a sharing with other 4 people. And the guy was next door. When I was rising, he was just going to bed. It was a completely different kind of what is considered, a daytime for devotee is a nighttime for a non-devotee, and vice versa. So I was just like almost chanting at the top of my lungs. And so at one wall it was bathroom, so there was nobody to suffer because of that. But there was another person, is a Spanish, very actually nice and friendly Spanish guy. But his girlfriend used to show up, and they would just starting to go to bed. By the time I was rising, and I was chanting aloud. So anyway, so that was very powerful experience. Even I was materially motivated, I could feel actually very strongly the presence of the Lord. Even though I was just like a completely new devotee, and that made a really lasting impression in for the rest of my kind of Krishna consciousness experience. That actually, if you really connect with the holy name, even though it may be materially motivated at that time, you may not be so advanced, but you call it for some material reason, the Lord will reciprocate. Of course, later on, I met his girlfriend in a town, and I apologized and said, "I'm really sorry. I was just like a new convert. I was, chanting so loud. I must have disturbed you." But they said, "No, it was okay. We actually enjoyed it, and we actually didn't sleep until 6 or 7 a.m. So it was fine, you know. They would not be sleeping anyway, so it was fine. So so that, and she got a book actually. Funny enough, a few years later, I was chanting, you know, at the top of my lungs. It wasn't as loud, although, but you know, that led later on. They were hearing the holy name, and later on, that led in meeting me and getting the book, you know, from me. So they got some, you know, further spiritual benefit. Although it probably was a bit annoying, they got the spiritual benefit of getting the book. So this feeling is so important and powerful, and this like we need to find and fine tune. We need to find the reason to put ourselves into anxiety before japa, and this is what the prayer and, you know, taking a moment to connect with the holy name before japa is actually how I can tune in into something where I feel that I need Lord's mercy. And, you know, the better motivation you find, you know, and a purer motivation you find, the better it is. But even if it's some material reason that will make you call the holy name with great feeling, that is good. But if you can fine tune and find some good reason that you feel actually properly motivated, and it is a Krishna conscious reason, and you just tune in to that reason and motivation that makes you call and cry for the holy name, that is the best possible japa you can connect with. And it doesn't have to be, you know, or shouldn't be really at the top of the lungs. Although Kalavecha Sridhar, when he was chanting 192 rounds, 64 of those rounds, he would chant at the top of his lungs. But, you know, we're kind of preaching movement, so you may, you know, disturb your neighbors. So it wasn't a good example for me to do it. I'm just like admitting and, you know, sharing that better not to chant at the top of your lungs. It's sufficient to chant that you can hear. And, you know, you don't chant at the top of your lungs in a temple room neither during japa. And the idea is to chant so that you can hear the holy name. So if you can connect and fine tune yourself to something that is kind of lacking, you know, I want to get rid of this anartha. You know, you're starting, and that's why it's powerful actually to connect with the person Krishna in your life. If you are able to, you know, starting develop that relationship with the personality of Krishna, not just, you know, the philosophical aspects of Krishna consciousness, but understand that philosophical aspects are leading into this wonderful, amazing person, and there is something very unbelievable awaiting you if you connect with Krishna and, you know, the goal of Goloka Vrindavan. And then you start realizing that there's many obstacles there, because sometimes we don't see those obstacles because we're just like a very into tamaguna. We don't see the goal beyond it, this wonderful goal. But then if you start connecting with that goal, you start to see there's many obstacles there that I really want to get rid of to get there. So the chanting then becomes like a calling. Please let me overcome those obstacles or become closer to you. Please clear my path. You know, I have this anartha and this thing. There is lust, there is pride, there is anger in me, there is envy, there is illusion. So please purify me so I can become closer to you. Please purify me so I can chant without any personal motivation. Please purify me so that I chant, you know, when will the day be mine? There's like various prayers that, for example, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is reciting, when will the day be mine? When my offense is ceasing, taste for the name increasing, when in my heart will your mercy shine, when will the day be mine? And it's like a calling, you know, when I'll be lower in a blade of grass, when there will be, you know, one verse I couldn't understand for a long time, you know, you're saying, you know, when my voice choke up and when there'll be shivering in my body, when there will be torrents of tears in my eyes, you know, because I was wondering, would a happy devotee could be calling for these ecstatic symptoms? But then I understood from Sri Ram Swami's teachings that the reason we want to get to that platform is because that's the most pleasing to Krishna. When you are in that very advanced state of a pure devotee, you become reach bhava and prema. When you act in that, from that platform, that is the most attractive. In fact, there is nothing really that can conquer Krishna, and that's why Krishna is somewhat reluctant to give it. Although, he's reluctant by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, it is possible for us to reach it, is because he becomes conquered and subservient to that love. So to aspire for it with the right reason, with the right motivation, is not a selfishness. Is actually we want to get there so that we can please Krishna in the best possible way. Because with that mood that we develop of pure devotion, Krishna becomes completely conquered and subservient to it, but he enjoys that. There is nobody that pleases him more than the devotees in Goloka, Vrindavan. So therefore, we want to get there as soon as possible, with as much determination as possible. And therefore, we need to cry like Ajamil. And Ajamil is crying, of course, due to material attachment, but we should call the holy name of the Lord so that those obstacles become removed. I want pure devotional service, or, I want to be instrumental to share it. You need to find some motivation. I want to be instrumental so that I can share that pure devotion to others. We can chant as well with that motivation. Please empower me, make me an instrument, so I can chant properly. Or like again in this same Kabir Habe Bolase, like when Lord Nityananda will show me mercy upon me when I reject the world of Maya, bestow unto me the shade of the lotus feet, let the right to preach the name be mine. When will the day be mine? And I will beg, borrow, or steal the nectar of the name, but the name's effective will be paralyzed. So we need to beg, borrow, steal. If somebody, we can see, if somebody is chanting in that mood, we need to connect with this devotees and hear from them and associate with them and learn how to chant with this emotion. So are there any comments or questions on this? Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. Just wondering how to actually maintain a fear of Mara. Sometimes things are bad, you have material loss, how to actually keep a constant awareness and fear.
One very powerful way of have that awareness is to study Srimad Bhagavatam. Just the other day we were reading with Javatvasi Prabhu and Chaitanya Chaitamrita. There is this one of the key verses actually of Srimad Bhagavatam. It says that we should understand the Lord directly and indirectly. And the Prabhupada in that purport, he was explaining in the first chapter of Chaitanya Chaitamrita Adilila that one of the understandings of indirectly understanding Krishna indirectly or see Krishna indirectly is through understanding of what not to do, through the understanding of how not to act. And the Shastra is full of the examples, and this is considered indirectly approaching Krishna, because on one hand we understand, what to do, another hand we understand what not to do. So if you study Shastra, it's unbelievable amount. In fact, pastime after pastime after pastime after pastime, it says of what to do. We see how devotees act, in their pure devotion, and also what not to do. We can see Indra is always struggling with various types of pride and or becoming puffed up in position. like that. So there's a many things of what not to do, or Ajamil, he becomes affected and drops his devotional service. So like that. So there is many examples of not to do, and if you continue studying it and reading constantly, you'll be reminded. And that is one of the most powerful things, because it's not possible to change anything until you develop awareness of the what is the right standard. It becomes apparent to you unless you're constantly hearing. The awareness of what you need to improve goes away, because we want to enjoy so much as a conditioned soul. We are conditioned in many ways, and there is attachments, and as we can see, attachment blinds people. And Ajamil, of course, very luckily had his name's son was Narayan. But when you're attached to something, your intelligence doesn't function so clearly and so properly. So you become kind of very narrow-minded about the thing, and insecure, and all sorts of things happens when you're very attached to something. You're afraid to lose the source of your attachment. So it becomes this great challenge, and the people sometimes act in silly ways when they become attached to something. Even like a very intelligent or people can act in a very silly ways when they have this certain attachment. But then by constantly hearing and reminding ourselves of what is actually the proper standard, what is our high ideal, and etc., then we get reminded, this is not the way to go. And also being in association of devotees, we will get reminded as well. And sometimes attachment is so strong that we are not able to ourselves, to disentangle ourselves. So some devotee will come in, hey, you're becoming attached to this thing, that will become an impediment in your Krishna consciousness. So yeah, studying Shastra, association of devotees will remind you. And also, so these are, of course, proactive ways. These are proactive ways of, understanding what is Maya and what is not Maya. And this is amazing, because Maya means that which is not. You look at some object and it looks like your friend, but it's actually your enemy. For example, lust. Lust, it looks like a very exciting. Yeah. This, how you call it, the expectation is like a very high, but what you get, it's far beyond the low beyond expectation. Like the Ajamil went for the prostitute, and he spent his life with the prostitute, but that accumulated so much of his bad karma. It made him lose his good qualities and so many other things, because of that attachment becomes so strong, this attachment to lust, that he was thieving and making all sorts of nonsense just to maintain his family. So he become totally covered. So studying, hearing from Shastra means weapon. The weapon will help you to cut through the attachment or to see the attachment. And then the sadhu, there's another person who cuts. It will help you to see what is your attachment, and help you to cut. Sometimes it may even come into strong words that we need to, can be even a little bit painful. But there is what is BBT? Of course, and there's another meaning, bouncing back time. So after somebody corrected you and tell this is the standard, and maybe you become aware of where you are and where you should be. Then sometimes it can be a little bit painful as well, and you feel a little bit discouraged. But BBT means bouncing back time. How long it will take for you to bounce it back into the positivity. And now I'm gonna, instead of feeling bad, I want to, adjust myself and improve and get into what is supposed to be, instead of becoming depressed or discouraged or thinking, no, this is not possible, or why me. BBT, bouncing back time. And you want to cut it as as soon as possible, bounce back into the enthusiasm, bounce back into what I'm supposed to be doing, and aspire for that goal that we have. And maybe we need to break it down into some intermediate goals as well. So you need to reduce the BBT time, bouncing back time. And the third thing that comes into the mind after Shastra and Sadhu that will help you to see the Maya is called the School of Hard Knocks. That's, of course, unfortunately for most of us, and that's going to be a case as to making a mistake, and getting into Maya a little bit, and not being sufficiently fearful, and getting into Maya, and then burning your fingers, and hopefully then you'll take shelter of either Shastra or the Sadhu or combination of both. And that painful experience that you went to, sometimes it can be painful, sometimes it can be a bit embarrassing, getting into Maya in some smaller or bigger way. But if we are prepared to then swallow a pride, because that's the biggest challenge when you do get a bit into Maya, then your false ego will think, what other people will think about me, what other people will say. If you can swallow that pride and inquire submissively, from some trusted person to help you overcome it, and then your path is clearing, then you will be able to cut through the knot of the attachment by hearing from the Shastra and by hearing from the thinking person. This knot of attachment and clear the path. And again, there is many illustrations where people did get into Maya, like Indra Maharaj. He did get a bit into Maya. He started attack Krishna, his own boss. He started to attack, and the most dear, most beloved devotees of Indra, he was like really trying to kill them. But Krishna then forgave and gave another chance, but it was very, very embarrassing. He was approaching and like begging for Krishna's mercy to be able to overcome this. So yeah, these are three ways that comes to the mind. Thank you for a very good question. Okay, I'll stop here. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande, Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.